These are very serious allegations against the Russians. What reaction has there been so far?
Good morning. The US has taken a very dangerous path by inciting tensions between nuclear powers, and its allies need to think about it. That's how the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov commented the latest accusations. He called them groundless and said that the only reason why Washington is trying to put all the hackings in the world on Russians is to justify new sanctions. It is an act of staged propaganda campaign. That's how the Russian Foreign Ministry commented the accusations coming from the Netherlands in its statement. And it said, it outlined that the data about the 4 expelled Russians came only 6 months after it had happened. And it thinks that it is linked with the OPCW session scheduled for next week, where the Western powers will try to empower the chemical watchdog, the right to blame those who are responsible for chemical attacks, and Russia strongly opposes that.
So that's the Russian official response. What about the media in Russia? Is there any difference in their reaction?
Well, there is, but a slight one. Many media are commenting the pro-Kremlin political analysts who say that those accusations are a part of a hybrid war against Russia, and that it is very hard to prove such cyber crimes, and the reason is to destroy Russia. Other media say that the West is trying to make fun out of the GRU agents who apparently forget to destroy a taxi bill where the GRU address is written, but others are quoting another investigation published late at night by the Insider Russia, who worked together with the Bellingcat, and they found one of those men, the man with this taxi bill, Alexei Marinets. He found in an open data source his car and an address, his work address, and it is one of the addresses of a military unit of the main intelligence directorate, former known as GRU.
Galina, thank you very much. Galina Polonskaya with The View from Moscow there. And we're going to cross over now to Brussels, where we can get the European view from Brian Carter, who's there for us. Brian, what's been the reaction from Europe to these allegations of Russian cyber hacking?
Good morning, Belle. Well, the EU officials were very quick to react to these allegations. The Presidents Tusk and Juncker and Chief Diplomat Federica Mogherini wrote a joint statement in which they said that these actions were, I quote, aggressive acts which undermine international law and international institutions. And they also added that cybersecurity will be discussed at the next EU Council meeting here in Brussels in less than 2 weeks. And as you know, these revelations yesterday came just as the NATO defense ministers were meeting here in Brussels at the NATO headquarters. And we heard some very strong words by different officials. For example, the UK Defense Secretary said that Russia was a pariah state. Jim Mattis, the US Defense Secretary, said that it showed a pattern of reckless and irresponsible behavior. And so the allies have vowed to stand shoulder to shoulder against these actions. We know that an increasing number of NATO allies are also committing their national cyber capabilities to the alliance. The incentive here, Bell, is really to pull all the resources together and also cooperate with other institutions like the EU in order to deal with these cyber threats in the future. Now, Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, also said that they needed to improve intelligence, they needed to improve cooperation, and that the best tactic to respond to these attacks at the moment was essentially to stop them and then naming and shaming Russia for doing these actions. But they were quite vague and unclear as to what kind of offensive approach they would have to these cyber attacks. You know that for years now there has been a rhetoric from NATO saying that a cyber attack could be considered just like any other attack and thus trigger the collective defense clause. But at the moment that does not seem to be the approach taken by NATO, and they haven't really specified how important an attack would need to be before it triggers a collective attack from NATO.
To Palu. Bill Neely, NBC News' chief global correspondent, is there for us. Bill, hopes had briefly flickered yesterday for finding survivors. Have those been extinguished now?
Yeah, Belle, I'm at the scene of the recovery of bodies in Palu, because this isn't officially a rescue operation anymore, because, as you say, the hope of finding anyone alive is now almost extinguished. A French team found signs of life at a collapsed Mercure hotel last night. They used sniffer dogs and an acoustic sensor and detected a heartbeat, but they had to leave overnight. And when they came back this morning, nothing. That heartbeat had stopped. The teams are now broadly using heavy machinery, bulldozers, knocking down unstable buildings, clearing away rubble. And that obviously is a bad sign for anyone who might be alive underneath. That is the scene at another hotel where 24 bodies are still buried. We watched this morning as one woman's body was recovered. Her daughter told me she's now lost her mother, her father, and her husband in that rubble, and they were unfortunately there to celebrate their wedding anniversary. Remember, almost exactly a week ago, Palu was a perfectly normal city, and at this time, as we speak, right now, there was a paragliding competition in full swing, and then the double disaster of the earthquake and tsunami struck. 7 of those paragliders were killed, and we saw this morning a South Korean paraglider cremated. He was an international paragliding champion, and his parents, his brother and his sister were there at the cremation. Just one of many, many tragic scenes here, Belle.
Absolutely. And Bill, the death toll that we have at the moment doesn't take into account those still missing. Do you think we have any idea yet of the scale of this tragedy?
No, I mean, the death toll is now just over 1,500, so it is rising slowly. There are 100 missing. Aid is also arriving slowly, and indeed the injured and survivors are being evacuated again slowly. Yesterday we saw about 100 injured survivors, children, old people, pregnant women, newborn babies loaded onto a military transport plane. But, I mean, thousands more are desperate to get out of here. The Indonesian government, interestingly, says it doesn't want any more foreign help. It doesn't want American transport planes or an American hospital ship. It has told foreign rescue and recovery teams to stand down. It clearly believes it can cope, but people in areas that we haven't got to, very remote areas, are still apparently crying out for help. They say they've been abandoned, ignored. They still want water, food and medicine. So there are still lots of question marks, and most of all, as you say, lots of question marks about the final death toll. But right now, it has topped 1,500. Belle?
OK, thank you very much, Bill Neely in Palu there. But now, you may remember the story of the sword in the stone. Well, now that story has had a bit of an update, and it's got a female protagonist. Cindy, tell us a bit more.
Wouldn't it be cool to have the sword here with us? But luckily, it's locked away in a museum in Sweden. It's called the Ljungskogans Lands Museum. Take a look at this sword. Looking pretty good, despite how old it is, protected in wood and leather, 85 centimeters long. Now, we don't know who owned it, and we don't know why it was, where it was, but we do know who found the sword. An 8-year-old girl. Here she is right here, Saiga. She was paddling in the summer. Her father posted this on Facebook. When she discovered it, pulled it out of the water, they alerted the museum, who sent out archaeologists to look it up. It's about 1,500 years old, predates the Vikings, and people are calling her the Queen of Sweden. Why? Well, they're making reference to King Arthur and his Excalibur, because legend has it, whoever owned Excalibur was the rightful sovereign of Britain. So one person saying here in Britain, we consider that a basis for government. What does she get in Sweden? And another person jokingly say, and we have a new prime minister, in reference to Sweden's recent elections. That was much easier than we thought. Unfortunately for Saiga, she is only 8 years old, and you have to be 18 to run for PM. So she has another 10 years. Val?
Yeah, absolutely. We could see her being that Queen of Sweden. Thank you very much, Cindy.